All right, American Hammers TV. Welcome to the show. I'm a little discombobulated tonight, as you will see. There's no West Ham flag behind me. I have children sleeping upstairs in the attic where I usually do the show, so I am in my boys' room um, in a rocking chair. So it's a different atmosphere tonight. Anyway, we have Casey from Chicago with us on tonight, along with Justin, who's also from Chicago, who's our regular Thursday night co-host. I look like Gordon Gekko because I was just in the pool. So sorry for the Wall Street, money never sleeps look. But anyway, right before we get started, a couple of very quick things. We want to mention, as always, our sponsor, Strava Craft Coffee from Denver. Wonderful craft coffee. Some with a little CBD oil in it in case you need to relax at the end of a long day. So pick up the Strava Craft Coffee, and if you go to the Strava Craft Coffee website, which you can get to from our website, if you enter the code Hammers15, I think that still gives you a 15% discount. We still have our shirts for sale. If you go to AmericanHammersTV.us, that's our website. If you go to the shop link, you can pick up shirts, T-shirts, crew neck shirts, all sorts of stuff. So check that out, and we give 10% of the money we're collecting to Isla Caton, and 10% to the DT38 Foundation. So it's good causes. And then I think we're mentioning too, Drinkware Design. Drinkware.com is another sponsor of us. There's really cool like custom mugs and stuff like that. I think we're getting some American Hammers TV mugs done. So Tim can drink his Strava Craft, and Wayne can drink his Jameson, and we can all drink whatever it is we drink during the show. So I think that just about covers all the business end of things. Casey, how's it going?
It's good, man. Good. Long day of work, ready for Saturday.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Me too. Yeah, I know. I was just wishing today that it was Friday night. Not that I don't want to do the shows. The shows are great on Thursday nights, but I'd love to skip right to the weekend at this point.
Yeah, I had one of those Thursdays that I thought was Friday today, sort of bummed me out a bit.
And then my son was trying to convince me earlier that it's Wednesday, and I was like, no, no, it's definitely Thursday. Like,
yeah, don't go back. Don't go back.
He's on summer vacation, so he doesn't know. He doesn't care anymore. He's not going to care until the end of August. He doesn't know what day it is. Justin, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Long day of work for me as well. And on top of all that, I'm moving apartments. So it's been a busy couple weeks, and probably going to be a busy next week or so, unfortunately.
I hate moving. I
don't think anyone likes it.
I hope to live in this house for the rest of my life, only because I don't want to move again.
It sucks.
I grew up in a hometown that I sort of hated, and that my parents sort of hated, because my dad didn't want to move. He just was like, you know what? I'd rather stay. Anyway, let's talk about West Ham. Let's get into it. Casey, you are in Chicago. Are you from Chicago?
Nah, I'm originally from North Carolina, and I bounced around a lot since about 2008. Probably, I've lived in almost every major city on the East Coast. I've lived in 2 countries since then, and kind of bounced around and found myself in Chicago for the last probably 4 years.
Nice.
But it's a great city.
We got a lot to get to then. Yeah, we got a lot to get. So let's start with the simple question. Why West Ham? Why West Ham? And Justin tells me you've been a West Ham fan for a while. So maybe tell us why West Ham, and maybe for how long.
Man, honestly, I don't even really know anymore. I've supported West Ham probably anywhere between 2006 and probably 2009, somewhere in there. I'm not even really sure anymore. A mixture of disappointment and early drinking probably left me somewhere in there. But honestly, it kind of something you fall into, and once you kind of get addicted to watching, or you feel an affiliation with something, I don't know, I'm just somebody not to give up on it. And there's been a lot of times where I really wish I could, but
Yeah.
But I mean, it's been great. I mean, I've made a lot of friends, and it's also one of those things where I couldn't give it up, because as you get into your mid to late 20s, it starts to get kind of difficult to meet new people and make more friends when you start moving to places where you've never been.
Mhm.
I always tell everybody, I was like, when I first moved to Chicago, I think every girl thought I was hitting on her, and every guy thought I was hitting on him.
You know what? I had that after I got divorced, and when I moved back to Boston. I lived in France for 5 years, and when I came back to Boston, I felt the same way. I thought the same way, and I wasn't hitting on every girl, believe it or not, and I wasn't hitting on any of the guys. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but yeah, it's awkward because you don't really know anybody, and people. I had a few friends here, but I had to meet a lot of new people. And yeah, it's a weird experience.
But
Um,
yeah, being a part of the Chicago Hammers, the Philadelphia Irons, and the NYC Hammers, it's just an easy way to meet people. And I really found that first friend group when I went to Temple for my undergrad, and meeting people through watching West Ham United at 9 in the morning. Some really, really rough days when we were in the championship, going to the bar and listening to us on the radio because it wasn't on TV.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
was difficult, but you become really good friends with people because you know you have to be a little kind of crazy in the head to wake up at 9 a.m. to walk down to the bar
Yeah.
and listen to the radio.
I like that. I like that playoff final flag you got behind you there. That's nice.
Yeah, it's that's obvious. That's honestly the greatest sporting moment of my life.
Did you go? Were you there?
I wasn't there. It was a group of us. I paid for expedited shipping, which was a stupid amount of money for somebody that worked two jobs and was still in school. But with me and my buddy Bob, who now lives in Cambodia, he is from Oxford and is a huge West Ham fan. So he bought a flag and I bought a flag, and we put it up in the bar and watched the game together. There was like 10 of us, and it was just a great day, man. I mean, I'm a Hornets fan. I grew up in North Carolina, so there's no glory in that. Panthers fan, there's attempted glory in losing to a quarterbackless Denver Broncos. So the only success I've ever seen as a sports fan was winning the playoff final. And to this day, it's still one of the best days ever. I think that the way that I ended up going home that day was probably around 3 o'clock, and my buddy walked me out of the bar, and I had that around my neck like I was Superman, and he just kind of pushed me towards my house, and I woke up about 7 hours later. So
It certainly was my best day as a West Ham fan, which for me goes back probably, I don't know, maybe close to 15 years, something like that. Yeah, it was certainly my best day as a West Ham fan, which is funny because we had to get relegated to begin with in order to have the playoff final, and then we had to fail to finish in the top two in the championship in order to have the playoff final. But it was a fantastic day, so it was all worth it in the long run. But so was there like a triggering moment when you realized you were West Ham, or did it just sort of like wash over you?
So it's kind of strange. I was a journalism and sociology student in college, and the thing that always kind of drew me to the sport itself, because I never played it growing up. Growing up in the South, I had a really Southern father, so I played football, baseball, and basketball, my entire childhood. If I wanted to play soccer, he would have looked at me and been like, "There's no money in it." I mean, if you're growing up in the early to mid 90s, there was no money in it. We didn't have a professional league. The World Cup happened in '94 on the basis that we would start a league in 2 years later. And I mean, there was no money in it. So fair enough to him. But the moment that I really remember it, and before I say this, I am not at all into reading or watching about football violence. It doesn't really excite me. But
Understood.
there was a documentary in the '80s called Hooligan, which is a really interesting documentary because it looks at football violence and basically high unemployment in England in the '80s and what these kids were doing. And there was a moment where Cass Pennant, who's extremely famous, I guess, for being a hooligan, but
Well, he
said
wrote
this
about it too. He's an author too. Really, his books are pretty good, I have to say.
he's really interesting. I think I've exchanged emails with him back in the day for something I was working on, but he said something that really clicked with me, and it was, out there I am every racial slur under the sun, but here I'm West Ham, which is a really interesting way to look at it because there was a lot of right-wing people in the ICF and follow West Ham, but he always felt at home. And I think that was the moment that really clicked with me, just because it's just such an interesting idea, right? To find a family away from your family, especially a man that grew up in East London to white parents. But yeah, I think that's the moment when I heard that, and something clicked in me where I was like, this is just really interesting. So, reading about the East End, reading about the socioeconomic space of the East End in the 80s was so interesting to me.
Yeah,
Um,
and I've also I've mentioned to these guys, Casey, about how I'm not 100% sure that I would have stuck with West Ham, or at least have been as passionate about the club as I am today, if it were not for you guys, the group of guys that we meet every week at AJ's. I would say that aspect of it is just as important, if not even more important, than watching the actual match. Like I said, I just don't know if I can't tell you 100% with 100% certainty that I'd even be as passionate or even into West Ham without the Chicago Hammers. So I think that's a massive. I think that's a massive part of soccer in general. Like that famous saying, like without fans, football is nothing. I think that rings true. And I think the example of what Cass Pennant said is just a microcosm of that.
Yeah, it's his. I don't know how many books he's written. I read one about his life in the ICF, and it's very much worth a read. I do suspect he embellishes some things here and there, but that's okay. I think there's a basis of truth in all of it. But the most important thing to me, Casey, was what you were talking about. Was he was a real leader for better or worse, because it was a violent organization, as we all know. But he was a real leader in the ICF, and there weren't, I don't think, a lot of black hooligan sort of top boys or top men. You know what I mean? I think that was.
You'd have to look at teams like Birmingham.
Yeah.
And maybe I think the biggest one that I can think of was Birmingham, possibly Reading. There's a lot of really interesting things that happened in the 80s under Thatcher's government, with a lot of you still see it actually today in the UK with the austerity and budget cutting for local governments. One of the most interesting things about football violence in Europe is that you can actually predict which countries have the largest amount of football violence by looking at youth unemployment.
Sure.
And it's the same here. I mean, if you look at, especially Justin will know, it's funny that we have a lot of people here that are in the Chicago public school system, or the school system here. One of our friends was a lawyer for the Chicago public school system. The other one is a principal here. We have a few teachers. And the rate at which schools are closing and after school programs and just things to keep kids from doing stupid stuff, they're closing very quickly. And when you don't have an outlet, when you don't have something to enjoy or be a part of, it's very easy to fall into things that aren't necessarily positive.
Absolutely. It's going to have consequences. There's no question about that. Have you read Among the Thugs?
I have. I think that Bill Buford is probably, I was a cook from about 16 to I think the last time I cooked was when I lived in New York and I was 25. He also wrote the book Heat, which is a very, very, very excellent book. Among the Thugs is probably one of my favorite books, and actually is one of the things that kickstarted my interest in soccer when I was probably 15. I think that his written word on the idea of groupthink is probably one of the most profound one of the most profound passages of writing I've ever read.
I agree.
And it's a phenomenal book. It really gives you insight into the mid to late 70s, early 80s of football violence, and just the reasoning why, and how easy it is to be caught up in the thrill of it, especially when your adrenaline's running 50 miles a minute.
He's a real hero to me. I used to be a journalist, not that kind of journalist. I wrote about technology, but I went through journalism school, and I got paid to be a journalist for a while. He's a real hero to me because he went out and did it, and that's something I wouldn't even have considered doing. It's just the fact that he went out and lived it, and the fact that he went out and had those experiences, and then he wrote about it so eloquently. It's a tremendous piece of work. It really is. but the hooligan side of things, as I've always said, I wouldn't have been a part of it. I don't necessarily want to condone it, but you can't say that it's not interesting because it is. And it's interesting culturally, it's interesting sociologically, and even on a psychological level, I think it's interesting.
100%.
And it's cool to me that a guy like Cass Pennant was, one of the leaders. One of the things I like about West Ham, which I didn't really know until I was already into the club, is that West Ham have a very solid record in terms of both fans and players of inclusiveness and diversity. I think West Ham were the first English side to start 3 black players in the same team, if I'm not mistaken.
Clyde Best, yeah, Clyde Best, and I honestly, you have to excuse me, I don't remember the other 2.
I don't either, but I know Clyde Best. Yeah.
It was funny. It's us and West Brom that were 2 of the first clubs to play black players in a predominant role. West Brom they've been extremely well documented on their ability to bring black players into the club and put them predominantly in the side. I can't remember. They have a nickname for their the players that play for them that I can't remember at the moment. But Clyde Best was very, very much so an inspiration for any footballer. And now he actually lives in the U.S. I think he lives on the West Coast and is still involved in soccer in some way, shape, or form.
We should reach out to him, Justin. We should reach out to him if he's in the U.S. especially.
He is. Yes, we definitely should.
I mean, that's fascinating. He's written at least one book about his experience. And I haven't read it, but I was poking around on Amazon today for some other stuff, and I saw it, and I thought, I should get that and read it because it looks. I'm sure it's really worth a read.
By the way,
he was actually a really good player too. He wasn't just
phenomenal. Yeah,
really good player. Yeah.
By the way, the other 2 guys were no worries. I did a quick search. The other 2 guys were Clive Charles, who was 20 at the time, and then I don't know how to pronounce his first name. It's either Ade or Ade Coker.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Oh. Yeah, I know who that is.
He was just 17 years old.
Yeah, they were young. So you had inclusion sort of on the pitch and off the pitch too, and I think and I realize there are skinhead West Ham fans. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we all know this, but I mean, at the same time, there is a legacy of the club that I think is a positive legacy.
You also have to remember too, though, like there's a reason that Clyde Best is Afro-Caribbean, and if you think about when the first ship of Afro-Caribbean people came to the UK, which was the Windrush in the 50s. Yes. You're looking at about 20 years on when these kids were growing up in Council Flats. They didn't necessarily have segregation the same way the U.S. did, legal and government-led segregation. So you had a lot of poor Black Caribbean kids growing up in the same flats as poor white kids, which is why it's really interesting, especially in the East End. The skinhead movement, like you just brought up, originally wasn't a racist movement. It actually stems from a lot of Caribbean culture, and a lot of those kids grew up listening to reggae and dance hall and falling in love with that culture. It wasn't until the second skinhead movement in the late 70s, early 80s that you started seeing the right wing kind of take over, and it was more about creating a uniform, more so than like when it first came around. Then it was a style, the Ben Sherman, the thin suspenders, boots. It was very different than what it was the second time around.
You know a lot about this stuff. You said you were a journalism and sociology major in school.
Originally, yeah.
Okay. I hope you didn't stick with journalism.
Nah, I work in advertising.
I work in
journalism.
Yeah, I work in marketing. That's where we all end up anyway, so it doesn't really matter. One or the other.
Pays better.
You've lived in the UK, and Justin said to me earlier today, you had something to do with Sheffield United, or you had some experiences in Sheffield. Is that right?
Yeah. So when I was in, I had this kind of crazy idea after watching West Ham for 4 or 5 years, and going to London for the first time in 2010, that I wanted to move back. I had a lot of friends there, and I I wanted to move back. I wanted to move to the UK, and I wanted to work in soccer and in football. So I applied and got into Sheffield Hallam University and did my master's in sport business management. So while I was there, I ended up working for Sheffield United for about 8 months. I went and worked for Aston Villa for like a week due to a documentary that I was shooting for my dissertation on safe standing in English football. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. You know, I mean, I would definitely move back at the drop of a hat, especially to work in soccer. You know, it doesn't pay a whole lot unless you're at the higher end. But you know, again, if you have a passion for it, you know, there's something special about working for a football club and then your office. You know, well, the office that you work in, not that I had an office as an intern. You know, the window looking out on the pitch, looking at the you know, the 18-yard box and the field any given day, or when I worked at Villa Park, you know, being able to walk out and sit in the Holt stand and eat lunch. You know, I mean, it's very surreal especially for a kid from North Carolina that you know, I didn't know if I'd ever I was the first person in my family to ever leave the country. I was the first person in my family to ever have a passport. So it's a very unique experience and something I'm extremely grateful for.
Do you have when were you at Sheffield United? Was this
I was at Sheffield United in 2013, 2014. So they were in League One.
Well after the Tevez affair? This is quite a
well after that. But I mean, it's funny, man. You know, I always joked around and said that I'm the only West Ham supporter that could walk into a bar in Sheffield on game day and not get my ass kicked.
Do you have any? Did you develop a soft spot for the Blades? I mean, was that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you can't. I mean, I still have very close friends and a mentor that still works for them. You know, I mean, somebody I stay in very close contact with. You know, still is one of the lead people at the club. So, you know, I definitely understand the anger. When I got there, we were just finishing our payments to the club.
Yeah.
But I also, you know, the thing that's crazy is I became friends with the niece of McCabe, you know, the owner, before he sold to the Sheik. So it's just so hard not to have a soft spot for somewhere I spent 8 months of my life.
Of course, that makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they ever give you grief for being West Ham at all?
Oh yeah, but I mean that. But then again, you know, the thing that I think I missed the most about the UK is the ability to take the piss out of somebody, because we don't have a culture of that here.
Yeah, no, we don't. We don't.
I talk. I mean, Justin Lillis, I talk so much shit to people, but I do because I don't find it offensive. I just find it funny, and I think that's one of the reasons that always drew me to the UK.
Yeah.
Overall,
it also bonds us too, Casey. Like, and I think it's representative in our group too, because we have Jamie, we have Matt, you know, two Englishmen, and you can just tell like the culture that they bring to our crew, and our crew loves each other. But yeah, we definitely are not short on the banter.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a sport built on, you know, taking the piss. I mean, the fact that we go away to City, lose 5-0, and start singing "We lose every week, we lose every week, you're nothing special, we lose every week." I mean, same old West Ham taking the piss. I mean, that's a part of it. I mean, that's a part of, and I hate to use this word because I can't stand the word banter, because I think too many people use it for
whoops,
doing terrible things. And I also think that the worst named supporter group in history is attached to the Chicago Fire, which is the Banter Buddies, which is just
terrible.
That in of itself,
Jesus.
That in of itself makes me cringe unbelievably.
That's all. I did not know that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's
remember Bosom Buddies, I'm sure. Yeah, the Tom Hanks sitcom from the early '80s, Bosom Buddies, where he and his buddies.
Oh yeah.
They did. Well, you might remember. Casey, you might be a little older than Justin. I don't know, but
I think we're about the same age. But I also know a lot of weird things about times before I was alive.
How old are you, Casey?
I turned 31 in September, so I'm 30 right now.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you guys are still youngins. That's all right.
Yeah.
So what did you do for Sheffield United? What kind of internship? I mean, what was sort of your routine there?
It's kind of unique. Being a master student, being a little older than a lot of the other interns or work experience people, I actually worked on a report. So every club in the football league has to be certified by Kick It Out, which is
Yes.
the Football Against Racism nonprofit.
Mhm.
And so I think it's every 3 years or every 4 years, you have to resubmit to Kick It Out to be Kick It Out certified, which all that means is that every club is as inclusive as possible to the local area. It's kind of hard to show inclusivity or access to the community when you're like 89% white and British, but there is an Asian and Black community in Sheffield, and they want to show that they are inclusive to everyone or accessible to everyone in the community.
Yeah.
So I had to take, newspaper clippings and internet articles and just show the work that they were doing in the community to submit to Kick It Out and basically just create like a collage essentially to send to Kick It Out and just be like, this is what we've been doing. They would write out a plan for the next couple years and the next 3 years and see how they would continue their accessibility programs.
Now, and it worked. Obviously, I mean, whatever you did was satisfactory to keep the certification going.
Yeah, no, they still have their certification. But at the same time, like I said, it's the vast majority of people that still go to Blaze games are white and British, but I mean that's the majority of the area. They're actually, they actually, not to get too deep, and I'll try to be very quick, but their Lord Mayor, cities in the UK, you have a mayor, which can be a political position, but you can also have one or the other or both. You can have a Lord Mayor, which is an apolitical position.
Okay.
They do stuff within the community. And the guy that was just Lord Mayor and just finished, and now he's a Green politician, Green Party politician. So shout out Magic Majid because he used to wear, and this is not about politics, but he was the first Muslim and also first millennial Lord Mayor in the UK. So the city itself is becoming even more diverse and more interesting. But Sheffield in itself is interesting because it's a university town.
What do they think of the Full Monty? Do you remember that movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think
It's
that
a pretty good movie, I think. But,
I think people from Sheffield love when anything's shot in Sheffield. I mean,
it's like 20 years old by now, easily.
yeah, I mean, it's a funny movie. I mean, there have been a few interesting movies shot in Sheffield. A lot of the Warped films, which is like This Is England,
Right.
Dead Man's Shoes. They're all films by one person. I can't remember his name, but Shane Meadows, and great movies, all shot in Yorkshire and Sheffield area. So they love those too. I mean, people are proud of Sheffield. It's the fifth largest city in the UK. Has about 500,000 people, and it's also one of the greenest cities in Europe. They have a lot of parkland, a lot of park space. It's built on hills, so for the most part, you're always walking up hills, which is not great.
Never downhill, just uphill.
Always uphill. I don't even know how that's possible. I don't think I walked downhill once when I lived there. I was just continually walking up hills.
Did you get to the Boleyn back then when you were over there, or were you at Sheffield United games most?
It's funny you're wearing that shirt because that's the first shirt that I ever bought.
Yeah, this
my-
is
2009, 2010.
Yes, because that's the year I went over there with
Yep.
my famous buddy Ken, who's not in the chat room tonight, but that's the year. So I have the home and away shirts from 2009, 2010.
Where's my thing? So the first ticket, first game I ever went to.
We missed each other by a month. I was there in February. Yeah.
We lost 2-1 to Bolton. I've been going to Upton Park since 2010 was the first year I went. The the last time I went to Upton Park was the Swansea game, which was the last Saturday before before the Manchester United game.
Forgettable match.
Yeah,
Forgettable match.
no, it definitely was. So I've never seen us win live.
Oh
I've been to
yeah, we have a joke because every time Casey goes to see West Ham play, we know they're not going to win. He's never seen them win live.
Never?
No, I've been to 13, 14 games, and
I mean, but that's just, here's the thing though. Is that your fault or is that just West Ham? I think that's mostly.
well, I mean, the fact is the last game I went to was the Liverpool 1-1 last season, and
that was worth watching. Now that was which we should have. Which we should have.
Easily the best game I've ever been to watch us play. But we should have won, but we still didn't. But that's the second time I've ever seen us draw. So,
and all the rest were losses?
No. I'm sorry. The first time I ever saw us draw was we played Leicester, not last season, but the season before, and I saw us draw 1-1 that game, and that was the first draw I ever saw. And then me and my girlfriend.
Was there a Dutch at the end of that game, or am I thinking of something else?
We won. Who was it? I want to say Ogbonna or Obiang scored. No, Cheick Kouyaté scored right before halftime, and then I can't remember who scored for Leicester. And then me and my girlfriend went last November, and that was her first game, and we lost. I don't know, 4 or 5-0 to Man City, and then I went back in February and saw us play Liverpool.
Interesting. I want to quickly mention the people in the chat room, if you don't mind, although I'm really enjoying talking with you. Sometimes I'll confess, sometimes we do the chat room because I don't know what else to ask, but you're a really good interview, so I'm doing this because it's something I like to do. I don't see Gabe. My buddy Gabe isn't here tonight. I'm really worried about him. I don't know where he is. My friend down in Austin, I don't know if his parents found out he's watching this and he got banned from his phone or something, but anyway. No Gabe, but I see Jim is in the chat room. Wally World, as always, is in the chat room. Keith says he loves our videos. We appreciate that. That's very nice. And Tim doing about 400 posts in the chat room to keep the conversation going as he does it. I think that's it. So it's a little bit quiet tonight, but that's not you, Casey. That's probably just because it's late June, and it's a Thursday night in late June, and not everybody's thoughts turn to West Ham on a Thursday night in late June, although ours do, obviously, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know what. Justin, do you have anything you wanted to?
Yeah.
You know each other anyway, so what did you want to embarrass?
Yeah. I mean, all of the stuff that we've been talking about, it's sort of gone over my head, like a couple of the books you talked about. I haven't really heard of them. And also I knew Casey was knowledgeable about a lot of things soccer, but Casey, you're impressing me. I didn't know you knew this much. It's pretty cool to listen to. But I actually wanted to bring it back to an America focus because Casey, I know you said you've supported West Ham and been a part of actually a few different supporters clubs in the country, which I think is pretty unique. I feel like people usually only experience one. So I guess my question to you is, what similarities were there between the groups besides obviously supporting West Ham, if any? What were some of the differences in some of the environments or just the way people supported between the groups? And how has your support, if at all, changed because of your environment throughout your journey there?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I think Philadelphia was, where I kind of found the first group of people that I really was really close to. Well, before that, I was in North Carolina and overseas in Japan, and you didn't find people that supported West Ham in either of those places back then. You were coming out of the early 2000s where the only way you had to watch TV was through watch the game was through Fox Soccer channel. And so with Philadelphia, it's very interesting because I think a lot of the guys there kind of found West Ham through the punk scene. Philadelphia is notoriously, or infamously, or famously, depending on how you look at it, really ingrained in the American punk scene. So bands like The Business, the Cockney Rejects, uh, there's another one I can't think of, Coxbar, that are all in some way, shape, or form kind of connected or tangentially a part of West Ham United or support West Ham United. Kind of got a lot of those guys into it.
Okay.
One of my good friends, Escher, who is infamous for his own reasons, lovely guy. But even to this day, rocks the skin, rocks like old school 50s skinhead attire, or not 50, excuse me, 60s skinhead attire, the Sherling jackets and things like that. He kind of pushed for there to be a Philadelphia Irons group, and a lot of those guys just grew up listening to punk music and being around that scene. I remember one night we all went to go see the Cockney Rejects play at I can't remember what it's called, Transportation Hall or something like that. It's been a long time. But, there was like 7 or 8 of us that would go every weekend to watch them play. You go to that gig, there's 30, 40 people, all in West Ham stuff, going to go see Cockney Rejects. We're sitting there, 7 people that go every weekend. Like, where the hell have you people been? We could probably get the bar to open earlier if you came.
So let me just ask you a very quick question.
Yeah.
And then I'll get back to it. So Jim in the chat room wants to know if you know Vanilla Muffins. Do you know Vanilla Muffins? I do not. Do you know Vanilla Muffins? Have you heard of
I know Gorilla Biscuits.
well, it's close. Now, let me ask you this, too. I'm just curious. Cockney Rejects,
Yeah.
I love the music. They're not, they can't be all that young anymore. What is that show like live these days?
This was 7, 8 years ago.
So they go back to the 70s. So,
Yeah, they're definitely not young, but when I saw them, they definitely had a lot of energy. It was fun and rowdy. It was a punk show. Go see any of those old punk bands. Hell, go see Rancid. They've got to be in their 40s now. They're on tour. Them and the Suicidal Tendencies are doing a tour now.
They're coming to Boston soon. Yeah.
With the English Beat, and you go see them. They're still going to rock out. They're still going to be a mosh pit. They're still going to be wild. I think that it's part of the persona. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to have that once you're, hell, the Rolling Stones are still. Mick Jagger's still shaking around now. So, and he's like half dead.
Mick Jagger is 4 days older than my dad, and my dad died 6 years ago. So give Mick Jagger some credit. That puts him at, I believe, 75, something like that.
What did they say in Wayne's World? It's the reason Keith Richards can't be killed by by normal technology because he sleeps upside down. Like
exactly. So that's interesting about the Philly. I would never have thought about that, but it makes sense about the punk scene in Philly. And you were in New York too, right?
Yeah, I was a little less affiliated with them, mainly because I lived in Brooklyn and Bed-Stuy, and waking up for a game at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m., especially when I was working 3 jobs and still cooking at that time, so I was still cooking until 2, 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
It was very difficult, and it was right when they had just refurbished and moved Smithfield Hall when I lived there. It's cool. I think that Smithfield Hall is just so crowded because there's like 3 or 4 clubs that all go watch there. Much like AJ's here in Chicago, we got City fans, Liverpool fans, Everton fans, and it just can get a bit hectic. It's still fun. Don't get me wrong, but it's also New York, and again, I was extremely broke, so being able to go and you're going to spend at least $50, $60 on beer.
Yeah,
I couldn't do it.
No, I know. Where did you live in Brooklyn?
I lived off the A and the C train in Bed-Stuy, off Madison and Nostrand. I lived there. I only lived there for about a year, a little over a year. I lived in Williamsburg on my friend's couch for like 3-6 months, and then I moved into a place for a little bit before I moved to Chicago.
Yeah, I lived in a neighborhood called Windsor Terrace that nobody's ever heard of.
Mhm.
kind of on the edge of Park Slope, right off the Prospect Expressway.
Yeah.
In fact, the Prospect Expressway ran right in front of the house.
Okay.
But I remember Brooklyn. That was 23 years ago. It was in '96, but for about a year. But I couldn't afford anything. Once I bought my subway tokens for the week to get to work, it was like half my paycheck.
Yeah.
So
Nah, man. I
going
was
out,
working 3 jobs, so believe me, I was just trying to make it. I was just trying to eat.
yeah, no, going out was really not an option. You'd walk past all these fantastic like restaurants and bars, and not be able to go into any of them. It was frustrating. So yeah, so now you've been in Philly, you've been in New York, you've been in Chicago. I can't remember where else did you say you've been. I mean, as far as supporters clubs.
No, that's it, really. I lived in Houston for like 6 months, but I never met anybody in the Houston area to watch games with, just because just the time of my life and what was going on. That, that's about it.
Yeah, Houston's a spread out place where I would imagine it's hard to meet people anyway. It's a big sprawling sort of city, but what are you looking forward to most with the season coming up? What do you think are? I mean, switching to the club a little bit. What do you think our
Yeah.
prospects are? I would love for us. I mean, I guess I'd love for us to sign Maxi Gomez, although I'm maybe not as excited as most people are. I still don't think it's going to happen because it's been mentioned too many times in the British press, and once something gets mentioned there more than a few times, it doesn't happen. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So to talk about players that we've actually signed, I've watched Pablo Fornals play for Spain both times now.
I had a great goal the other day. Great goal the other day.
Great goal. Extremely technical player. Much like Lanzini when he came to us, I think that he's going to have to put on weight to be able to hold the ball. I think that he's going to be, one of the things about Spain that you don't that's a benefit for players is you can be a bit slighter. You have more time on the ball. I think that you don't get pushed off of it as easily. You don't get pressed as hard or physically. But the kid has extreme technical ability. If he can add that muscle mass to his game, we're gonna have one hell of a player. That we've been linked with a player named and anybody that is that speaks Spanish or Hispanic descent, I apologize, I can't say his name in Spanish, but Joan Jordan, he plays for Ibar. We've been linked with him lately.
Little tiny Ibar, one of my favorite clubs in Spain. Little tiny club that punches way above its weight in the top division there.
So we've been linked with Joan Jordan. I don't know. There are mixed reports saying things like, we aren't really after him. That it's an old report. He was somebody we're looking for if we didn't get Fornals. But I would love to see him come into the club.
I heard I heard he's not coming in unless Obiang goes out, essentially.
Which and that's fair enough. You need to make room in the midfield because you really only have 4 positions in the advanced midfield, and we know for a fact that Anderson's always going to play when fit. I would believe that Yarmolenko, Antonio has that right spot set, especially for playing a 4-1-4-1. Rice is definitely set. I would argue that Masuaku, Fredericks, Balbuena, and Diop is set. Fabianski's set. So really what we're looking for is 3 players. You're looking at whoever's going to start in the central midfield.
Yeah.
One most likely going forward in an advanced position, and one that's just more central. And that one more central will be a player like Noble. We could see him try. I think I'm very interested to see preseason because I want to see if he plays Lanzini and Fornals together. I don't know how that would work, but we'll see. But I think Joan Jordan, if he could come in, he has more tackles per game, more key passes per game than Noble. He's 24. He's going to be faster just based on the fact that he's younger. He could be a great all-around player.
And there's no way. I mean, as much as I love Noble, there's no way he gives us 38 games plus cup match. It's not. I mean, I don't think he has it left in him. I think he has, 12 or 15 games per season, and sometimes he looks really good. I mean, at the end of last
Only
season,
12 or 15, really. I think he can give us more than that. I think he can give us 25 if we needed him to.
I hope so. I mean, I would love that to be the case. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
that
sorry,
what
go
you're
ahead, Casey.
seeing though is that to dabble into basketball. I mean, let's treat him like Kawhi Leonard. Rest him for some games, man. I mean, if he can play 15 games and he can be at his top for 15 games, I mean, how much more could you ask somebody that's 33 years old?
I'm just not as worried about Noble as I feel like other people are, and especially because he actually, I thought, played better as like the last month of the season, month and a half of the season. I thought, he was probably playing his best soccer, and you'd think, oh, he's so old, he doesn't have the legs in him. You'd think that would be the time where he actually loses and decreases his performance level, but it was actually the opposite. So while I agree that he is another year older, we definitely didn't need to moderate his playing time. But I think he can probably still play a little more than people think.
Well, I think that if you remember too, Noble's always been a player. I mean, even since he came on the scene in 2004 or something like that. His best season was the Paye season, and 2012 or I guess 2013, 2014, whatever that.
15,
Yeah.
16.
the last season, 2016. Yeah.
Whatever that was, but he's always been a player that plays better with the best players around him. And honestly, I think one of the reasons that you saw him really pick up steam towards the end of the season is you saw the whole team pick up steam towards the end of the season. We had the majority of the team fit for the first time in the entire season. And he was able to really be that linchpin in midfield that was able to make passes, was able to get forward a little bit instead of always having to play on the back foot.
His cross pitch passes and sort of downfield passes are still some of the best in the Premier League. Pinpoint precision he has. And I know we don't necessarily like to play, long ball, but it's effective when he does it. He is good at it.
Yeah.
And, I love his spirit. I just love the fact that he's a fighter. He doesn't take
Mr. West Ham.
Yeah, I mean, he takes no crap off of anybody. He'll lift a guy up and carry him across the pitch if he has to.
So Casey, sorry, Lee. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask Casey. Casey, I'm interested in who, if you had to pick one guy that we haven't signed yet that you would really want us to sign, who would that be? And then on the flip side, one guy that you definitely want out. So one guy in, one guy out, you get to choose. And then assuming that would happen, what would be your ideal lineup in the first match of the season?
One guy in, one guy out. And I know, this may sound a little weird, but honestly, it's mainly because I don't watch La Liga. But going off reports, looking at statistics, I would love to have someone like Maxi Gomez come in, and I would love to see.
We need strikers. We need strikers. So yeah.
Yeah, and if we're looking at it from the standpoint of, I would say Chicharito gone, but if he, let's say he's already gone, I would love to see. I mean, there's a report that just came out that Inter Milan was looking at maybe Arnautovic as a striker if Edin Dzeko doesn't go. If we sold Arnautovic, I wouldn't care as long as there was someone to bring in again. I think what's
the minimum amount of money you would accept for him?
30 million. I mean, honestly, at this point, 35.
I think 30.
I think that
he's a known quantity is the thing. And I understand everybody's objections to him completely because I felt the same way. The thing is, if he decides to play for us, he's a known quantity. And what worries me about bringing in other strikers, which we need to do anyway, is you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, we've brought in so many, Zaza and Cagliari and Andre Ayew, and you sort of go on with guys who came in, some of them for fairly large fees, and they just weren't that good.
Yeah,
it goes back to our transfer policy. I think that our transfer policy in the past has been so bad as far as as far as having a plan on how to use these players.
Right.
That's
You know,
We didn't have a director of football. We have a director of football now who knows what the hell he's doing, and a manager who's a world-class manager.
we have a much better manager in place. That's very true. A far superior manager.
So-
And I'm not trying to hit on Slavin. I love Slavin, but I think it's more Huselos. I think
I didn't.
he's just
I love Slavin's attitude. I didn't love him as a manager. I think
he wasn't the best manager in the world. No, he was not. But his
So-
attitude was number one. I love.
there's a reason that Pellegrini is fine keeping Arnautovic. There's a reason that he's looking for players in the stature of Maxi Gomez, and there's a reason why Chicharito just doesn't work. The reason for all of this is we have two fullbacks in Masuaku and Fredericks, and we could talk about Cresswell as well, who can't cross the ball very well. You have two wingers who are inside forwards, which you know, Anderson, if he's on the left side, and Yarmolenko or Antonio, they cut in. They don't go to the touch line. If they go to the touch line and look for a cross, that is why Chicharito would be effective. Chicharito, I've watched him live for the Mexican national team. I've watched him play most of his career for the Mexican national team and for United and then for us. Us is the first time in his career I've ever seen him not sit for 75% of the game on the shoulder of the last defender. So you have to have people that can either put low crosses in or even high crosses in to get to him in the inside of the box, because he can always beat that last defender to the ball.
It's not designed to do that. I mean,
Exactly.
as you said, Anderson and whoever's on the right, whether it's Antonio or even Snodgrass, whoever gets put into that slot on the right, they're designed to cut in. As you said, it's not. We're not designed to come down the wing and throw in a cross. It's supposed to be. We're not designed to be wide, to go wide. And he needs that kind of width and that kind of service. And I just don't think he fits into our system.
What you're looking for in Arnautovic and possibly Maxi Gomez is, from what I can tell, through clips or, whatever, which I don't think any of that is necessarily the most effective, but looking at statistics and things like that, they're big enough to be able to hold up the ball. And if you can hold up the ball, play 1-2s outside of the box with Anderson, play 1-2s with Yarmolenko or Lanzini, giving them space to make shots inside the box, or hopefully Fornals going forward, that's going to get you. That is going to get you goals, which is why Arnautovic is there. I mean, he holds the ball up well. He can strike the ball. He has enough pace to get around if you need him. He's a good all-around forward. The problem is he's not a forward. He is He's not a center forward. He is an out-and-out winger for the longest time, and he's been transformed into a forward. So, and I think that when we have him up front, we have a very blunted system that lacks focus, because I don't think we're playing with one idea of what we're trying to do with the ball. I think playing with a striker that is someone like Maxi Gomez, or who would have been perfect for us back in the day, Radamel Falcao. Radamel Falcao is one of the greatest strikers I've ever seen live or on TV with his back to goal. And if we had Radamel Falcao from 5-6 years ago, probably longer than that, because it was before the injury, before the World Cup, before he went to United and wherever the hell else he went, he would have been phenomenal in this team. But then again, we're talking about, getting the DeLorean out and going 88 miles per hour and bringing him back from, the past. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't. Maxi Gomez for me, we've talked about this on the show a lot. I can't evaluate him as a player. I don't watch a lot of La Liga live. I don't think you can watch YouTube clips and get any sort of idea of what kind of player somebody really is. What concerned me was his goal scoring fell off quite a bit in the middle of the season last season, and he had some disciplinary issues. And I don't know that he's a messiah for us. However, we need strikers, and he looks like an effective striker. So, yeah, would love to get him in on that basis.
My biggest thing is he has adult braces, and that freaks me out.
He does.
He's still a kid, though, Casey. He's like 22 years old. I know it's old for braces, but he's not.
But anyway. So real quick, my starting 11 for the start of the season. If everything, let's say just right now, I think that, like I said, our back five is set. Fabianski.
Well, we are keeping Diop, right? I mean, this business.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't see it. I mean,
I love for once. I love something. I guess it was Sullivan did when he said, "Sure, if you want us to Diop, give us what did he say? 60 million pounds plus Anthony Martial."
that was Vasilios. Yeah. He said, give me 60 million and
basically saying, F off.
No, it's wonderful. It's fantastic. I love it. I love the fact that we can do that to Manchester United. The other thing, you remember last summer, Arnautovic was as good as gone to Manchester United, and as it turned out, there wasn't even an inquiry. I mean, he was never even, So all the reports you read about, Manchester United are in for so and so. I mean, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. I cannot imagine us selling Issa Diop unless he forced a move.
I completely agree.
I mean, you see West Ham are posting Instagram videos and Twitter videos of, we signed Issa Diop a year ago and here are his greatest moments. And, I think that's a sign that we're going all out to make him happy and, keep him at the club. So.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what's going to happen. I think that the worst comes to worst. I don't know what he's on. I have to assume it's around at least 60,000 a week. Bump that up to 80. We just got rid of 210 a week through Carroll, Nasri, Perez, and somebody else. And I know that here in Chicago we have some people that either really like the troll or really did love Carroll. I think
7 years ago I loved him back before he used a walker and a cane to get around everywhere. I mean, sure, but we know he hasn't been effective in years. So
yeah, but I mean, I've had this chat with a few people. I mean, the most useless signing we've had, and it's really hard because actually after working at a football club, it really does make you think about calling people useless. But in reality, we have to talk about it as it's the same thing as like playing fantasy football, right? If you play fantasy NFL and you're like, damn, somebody got injured on my team, you're thinking about your team before you're thinking about the human that's there. But let's be honest.
They're not useless human beings. They're just as football at West Ham. Yeah,
they're just bad at their job. But I mean, Carroll and Kieran Dyer are the worst two players I've ever seen play for us. I mean, Kieran Dyer, if I'm not mistaken, only played one full 90 minutes for us in the 4 years he played for us, and he was on like 80,000 a week at a time where that was a ton of money for us.
Yeah, he would have been so good. He just was never healthy.
He was just made of glass.
It's my fear with Jack Wilshere too. He's got that same history. So
yeah, I mean, I try to be optimistic every time we have a player, but once we signed Jack Wilshere, I was just like, I can't even believe we did it. I hope that his deal is more based on incentives for playing, sub appearance bonuses, bench bonuses, goal bonuses. I'm hoping that is a lot of what he's on. But at the same time, we just don't know from the club. I mean, he for all I know, he could be on 80,000 pounds regular a week plus bonuses.
And I fear for Yarmolenko's form. I mean, he's coming off an injury. Lanzini never really properly recovered. I always compare him to Gordon Hayward. If you want to talk about an American sport, talk about basketball. Similar idea. Gordon Hayward comes to Boston, shatters his ankle, and then he really
wasn't that the first game too, Lee?
Do what?
Wasn't that the first game as a Celtic as well? He did that on?
I think it happened within like 10 minutes of his debut. Yeah, it happened in the first quarter, if I'm not mistaken. Early in the game, anyway, against Cleveland. But yeah, so I mean, he never really got back into form, and we don't know whether he will or not. Like he may or he may not. I don't know. I worry the same thing with with Lanzini. I know there's been some talk about him going back to Argentina. That seems to have quieted down considerably.
I can't see that happening because I can't see it happening from a monetary standpoint.
No,
River Plate, no matter how much money that they have, is never gonna be near the same amount of money we had. And you have to remember, he left River Plate to go to the Middle East and played for.
River Plate will take him back when he's like 35. I mean,
yeah.
And I'm not saying that. Obviously, that's an enormous South American club. But you really can't compare South American football to the top 4 or maybe even 5 leagues in Europe. It's just not the same.
But I'm looking at it from just a pure economic standpoint.
Totally.
If you think about it from the fact that he's, 25, 26? your career is so short, and maybe and I think that now after his injury before the World Cup, you can't. That's gonna scare anybody, right? Like
Absolutely.
that would be like me waking up tomorrow realizing that I completely forgot everything I know in advertising and I have no idea what I'm doing. When in reality, I have no idea what I'm doing most days anyway. I just kind of wing it.
That's been my whole career, but we'll get into that. That's a different topic for a different show.
Exactly. But
I know what you mean.
that has to scare someone to be like, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe he's coming back and he wants more money because time in football is so short. I mean, he's 26.
Listen, I never blame an athlete for asking for more money ever.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I don't care who it is. I don't care whether he deserves it or not. And I don't know whether he deserves it or not. But the point is, if I knew that my career would fundamentally be over, and I'm 45 years old, if I knew that my career would fundamentally be over by the time I was 30 or 35 and I was in my 20s, man, I'd be getting everything I could,
Exactly.
and I'd go anywhere. I mean, sorry, but loyalty is just kind of stupid at some point. I mean, it just is. If you're an athlete, you're not about the club you support. You're about your career and your life and your family and your future. And you got to make it while you can. And so I don't.
And there are some people there's some rare people like Mark Noble, which I think it's due to his, and I say this with all due respect, limited talent. And by limit, I mean he's a great player, but limited. It's a combination of limited talent and being paid and also feeling comfortable at the rate he's being paid. That is a perfect combination and a perfect storm that kept him with us for as long as it did. If unlike Steven Gerrard, right? Steven Gerrard had a chance to go to Chelsea when Mourinho was there, and he ended up not going. He ended up turning down, staying in Liverpool, never winning a league. But that was not due to him having a giant offer on the table. If you were going to Chelsea at the height of the Abramovich era and Mourinho was there, you're getting paid. Like, that's a fact. I don't think anyone's ever come from Mark Noble and been like, we'll give you double the money you're on right now.
No, I don't think so either. I think it's, as you said, it's a perfect storm. A good player, good enough to be a regular West Ham player, good enough to be a player in probably a lot of Premier League teams, but not necessarily the top 4 or the top 6. Even
if he went to the top 4 or top 6, he would be a great bench player.
That's what I mean. Exactly.
He would be. Is Joe Allen still on? Is Joe Allen the one at Stoke, or is he the one that's still at Liverpool?
I don't remember. I gotta be honest, I don't remember.
I can't remember.
He's not at Liverpool. He's not at Liverpool.
I can't remember who I'm thinking of that's at Liverpool, but there are players on the Liverpool bench that like Mark Noble, I think, could be a great bench player for a lot of teams, especially in the top 4, top 6.
But I'm not sure he would have ever gone, much farther than that, even at his peak. Although I do love him, he has a ceiling as a player. All right, we're gonna have to go in a few minutes, but we're trying a new thing. Oh, my computer almost just slid off of this little lap desk I'm using. That was almost a total disaster. My brother-in-law's MacBook here. Anyway, we're trying this new thing. We're doing 10 quick questions at the end of every interview. Honestly, I would like to keep talking to you for like another couple of hours, but yeah, I'm sure you have other things to do, and I have to like vacate this room at some point. So 10 quick questions, and I will try not to interrupt you, even though I'll be tempted to do so.
Yeah.
We're trying to ask these of all of our fans we have on from the different sports groups. So are you ready to go?
Yeah, sure.
You ever watch? Okay, this is not one of them. It's not one of them. But you ever watch Inside the Actors Studio? You ever watch that? Too?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about.
That guy is the most obsequious guy. I've never seen anybody kiss up to people as much as he does. It's amazing. Anyway, I mean,
Dave Chappelle on there is one of the greatest things. One of the greatest interviews of all time.
Total genius, because I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the movie Half Baked, but he's treating Half Baked as if it's Dr. Zhivago. You know what
I mean, to be fair, when I was Half Baked and I saw it, it was Dr. Zhivago.
Oh, I like it better than Dr. Zhivago as a movie. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, he's treating Half.
It was my Chinatown.
He's treating Half Baked as if it's like, sort of a multiple Oscar-winning, tour de force. And I mean, anyway, yeah. So this reminds me of the James. I think this guy's name is James Lipton. The James Lipton questionnaire. All right, so first question: full English breakfast or pancakes and sausage?
Ironically, full English breakfast, but I'm still Southern.
Yeah, I'll have the same dilemma. I think that's the correct answer, though. Favorite goal you have seen West Ham score?
Mark Noble, or I'm sorry, Scott Parker versus Chelsea. He was outside the box. Peter Cech hit the ball away, punched the ball out of the box. I think maybe on a corner, and Scott Parker side-footed it up over everybody in the 18-yard box, and it landed perfectly in the back corner of the net. It's one of the most beautiful goals I've ever seen in my entire life.
I remember it, and I still to this day love Scott Parker. I do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care.
100%.
I really love the guy. One of my favorite West Ham players of all time. All right. Wayne came up with these. Wayne came up with these, so some of them are a little more English than I would have maybe asked. But apple pie or meat pie?
Oh, meat pie. There's a place in Chicago called Pleasant House Pub that does the greatest British meat pie that I've ever had in the U.S.
I like the Patsies, I have to say, in Cornwall. I like the Patsies.
Oh, yeah.
Similar idea, right? It's the same kind of thing. All right. A word. I don't know. I guess we're going to see how this goes. A word that makes you happy.
Squeegee.
Squeezy?
Squeegee.
Oh, squeegee.
It's just such a weird damn word.
It's like it's not a real word. Is that a brand name?
No, well, it might be. But then again, heroin's a brand name, so.
What was?
I said, then again, heroin is a brand name, so.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's not the name of the drug. It's actually the name that it was given when it was created.
Well, I did not know that.
There you go.
There is so much that I do not know. All right, so where the next essay? Favorite curse word?
One I cannot say here. It's 4 letters.
Listen, I mean, that's up to you, but I'm just saying we've had Gary on, so you can say whatever you want.
Oh, I mean, I think fuck is one of the greatest, most expressive words in the English language.
You can go so many ways with it. It's true.
100%. It's very versatile.
It's very versatile. I thought you were going to drop a "see you next Tuesday," which American ladies hate. But
I'm a big fan, but it's just I can't use it in daily life.
No, not here. You can't. You could over there, I'm sure, but over here, you can't do that over here. Yeah, we couldn't do that over here. Team you love to beat?
Tottenham. I cannot stand Daniel Levy. I can't stand anything that they do in North London. I used to stay 2 blocks away from the old White Hart Lane, and I legitimately would spit on it every single time I passed it. I cannot stand anything about that club. There are players there that I really appreciate, and I called out Dele Alli years ago when he was still at NK Dons that we should have signed him, but now I just could do without him.
Yeah, fair. And they have some of the worst American supporters too. A player, any player, West Ham player, present day or past, that epitomizes West Ham for you.
This is going to be a little, and this is not me being pedantic or trying to be weird. Jordan Spence. I absolutely love Jordan Spence. He was a right back in the youth setup. He played a few times for us.
I remember him, yeah.
But extremely unfulfilled potential. Actually, I'll take that back. Ravel Morrison. Because as a club like West Ham, we have so much potential, or at least we believe we have so much potential, and then it just ends up going to shit.
Yeah, it's funny. That's actually, I was thinking of our friend Jack Collison, who's going to be on with us on Monday. His situation was different, obviously, for Morrison. Jack was a great player and a great guy, but he had this terrible career-ending injury so early in his career. And
Dean Ashton, same way.
Gene Ashton's actually another example, very similar.
But shout out Ravel Morrison because he just left Ostesons in Norway today.
Did he?
Whether he was cut or whether there's a whole thing about how they said he walked out on the club and he's saying no, I didn't. They didn't want to renew my contract. I don't know.
Can't wait to see him in MLS. That's probably the designated player that Crafts will sign. It's for Vilmos. Anyway, okay. So the current West Ham player you enjoy watching the most?
Felipe Anderson. He's just phenomenal. Felipe Anderson, or I mean, obviously, I love seeing Declan Rice do well. I mean, that's just a great story.
Yeah, he's such a goofy guy too. That's what I love about Declan Rice. Let's see. The player from West Ham's past you would bring back now to play for us.
Probably. Well, if we need a striker, Paul Di Canio. But honestly, I'd bring back Scotty Parker. We need somebody in midfield. If we're going way back, I mean, you could say we could use Billy Bonds. If we're going way back, I'd take Bobby Moore to replace Balbuena right now.
Yeah, well, I think anybody would.
Yeah.
I mean, from our era, for me, it's absolutely Scott Parker from my era. If I'm going to be asking these over and over again, so I guess I shouldn't answer them.
Oh, good.
All right, so the last one is if you found a time machine. This is a weird one, but I kind of like it. If you found a time machine and traveled back to 1990 and you were in Bobby Moore's back garden, so let's just say when Bobby Moore was alive, so prior to 1993, and he was sitting there with a cup of tea, what would you say to him?
This is kind of dark. Go to the doctor.
Yeah, no, that's not dark. No, I think it's actually a very compassionate and reasonable thing to say.
And if I had one question, I'd be like, do you know Brian Clough, and can you please introduce me to him? Because Brian Clough is my single favorite human being in soccer football history, and if he's a very flawed figure, and if anyone watching this gets a chance or loves to read, Nobody Ever Says Thank You by Jonathan Wilson is probably my favorite football book, and it's the biography of Brian Clough, and it's one of the most, for a biography, it's very hard for anyone to look at a biography and call it a roller coaster ride, but for a biography, it is a roller coaster ride and one of the most interesting and insightful books I've ever read.
Jonathan Wilson, the author's name? Jonathan Wilson?
Jonathan Wilson. Jonathan Wilson is arguably one of the best journalists in the past two decades in soccer. He wrote a book called Inverting the Pyramid, which is the history of football tactics.
I've heard of that.
Angels with Dirty Faces, which is about the history of Argentinian soccer. I can't remember if he wrote this, but I think Football Behind the Iron Curtain, but that may be someone else.
No, I've heard of that one too.
Also, just a fantastic contributor to a lot of podcasts and football shows.
Brian Clough is probably my favorite all-time English football figure who was not involved with West Ham. I think it's absolutely fascinating. I think he was brilliant. I have not read the book The Damned United, which I realize is kind of semi-fictional, but I have, of course, seen the movie, and it's fantastic.
The problem with The Damned United is that it was written by a guy. So I had read one of his books. It's called Tokyo Year Zero, I think, and it's a book that he wrote about the occupation of Japan. He does this really weird thing where he repeats himself a whole hell of a lot. And if you go back and he wrote a book, his follow-up, well, not his direct follow-up to that, but his follow-up in football books was about Liverpool and about Shankly. But he does this really weird thing where he just repeats himself for almost an entire page, and it's the same sentence written over and over and over again. And he does the same thing in The Damned United. It's one of the most annoying writing styles I've ever read in my entire life. If you get a chance, there's tons of books on Brian Clough. There's one called Old Big Head, which is a biography of him because he was nicknamed Old Big Head. Nobody Ever Says Thank You by Jonathan Wilson. I mean, there's tons, but I don't think any of them come close to the 700-page behemoth that is Jonathan Wilson's book. And Jonathan Wilson, the interesting thing about the reason why I wrote it was that he is a Sunderland fan, and Clough played for Sunderland and scored something like 256 goals and 260 some odd appearances for them.
Yeah,
so.
no, that's amazing. I know. Speaking of The Damned United, the guy who wrote the book lost a libel suit. One of the former Leeds players, Jimmy Giles, or one of those guys, sued. And
I think it was Giles.
I think it was Jimmy Giles because it's not, and he had to kind of come out and say, well, wasn't really like a factual nonfiction book. It was kind of a fiction book with some like a historical fiction, maybe you call it. But anyway, he basically got busted for
Which is kind of weird, man, because like we have those books like Abraham Lincoln, the Vampire Slayer, and stuff like that. So I don't see anybody from the Lincoln family suing them for that.
I think he had to remarket the book, if I'm not mistaken, as fiction as opposed. I think originally it was like it was a nonfiction title, and he kind of had to come back after the lawsuit and say, "Oh well, I didn't really mean it as nonfiction. It was more sort of based in fact, but not really." So I think he just got into some trouble. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, of course.
So you have to take any movie based on a book with a grain of salt. You have to take this movie with a larger grain of salt because it's based on a book that lost a libel suit. However, I did love the movie. It's very entertaining.
It's unbelievable. It's one of the most entertaining football movies ever made.
And I love Brian Clough, and we only have like maybe one more minute, but I'm going to find sometime tomorrow and post the interview he did with Don Revy. He back in I think it was 70. Well, it was right after he got sacked by Leeds. He and Don.
He left and went to the Yorkshire. Yeah,
right. And it was on Yorkshire television. I can't remember the interviewer's name, but it's the two of them sitting in the same room talking to each other, and you can cut the tension with a knife. It's fantastic.
And apparently, I just read about this. Apparently, he didn't know that Don Revy was going to be there.
No, that's what I've understood too. He did not know, and so it was a surprise to him. But he handles himself. He's obviously furious, right? But he handles himself really well, and he makes really valid points. Don Revy has kind of come off in history as a little bit of a villain in English football. Like he failed as England manager, and his Leeds teams. When you look back, people look at him now as having been kind of a little bit thuggish and rough, and not very beautiful to watch. And so I think Don Revy has not really had the same sort of exoneration by history that Brian Clough has had. But
not at all.
But that's where the two of them met. Anyway, Casey, I gotta go. We gotta let Justin go. Let everybody else go. This has been a fantastic, fantastic conversation. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and I want to have you back on soon.
Cool. Yeah, man. It's been great talking to you. And Justin, hopefully I'll see you soon.
Yeah, man, for sure. Thanks.
All right. We will be back Sunday night with a bit of a mix with was a one hammer from Mississippi and one from Iowa. I guess if you live in like a somewhat less populous state, you just get lumped in with somebody else from a less populous state. But anyway, we're all hammers, so that's all that matters. It should be good. And then a Monday afternoon, Mondays, there's like 10 shows on Monday. I'm going to try to put some of this stuff on our website eventually. We have Tom Atherton Monday morning. Monday afternoon at 2, one of my favorite West Ham players of all time. I owned his shirt before I had him sign it, Jack Collison. So we'll see you guys soon. Casey, thank you very much. And come on, you Irons.
Thanks, man. Come on, you Irons.